Welcome to our experience. I'm Chad, CEO of ASCP, alongside my co-hosting partner, Tom Hansel. And today we're very lucky and fortunate to have Jim as our guest.
Hey, everybody. How's it going?
Jim Lewis is our Senior Director of Policy and Advocacy and really all things government. As part of his brand, he's also running for Alexandria City Council. He's wearing an I voted sticker. I mean, this is all on brand. This is not, and he didn't do this just for today. He came this way today.
I did vote. I literally voted probably 20 minutes ago. It was easy. The Taco Bell order took longer than it did to vote early, but there was only one person on the ballot, so it wasn't that hard.
So Jim, if you're not familiar with Jim, he's been here for a few years. He leads all of our advocacy and government work. He comes from a political background working for Barbara Lee and
Robin
Kelly in Congress, and brings a perspective that and an expertise that we don't normally have at ASCP or an association. So he's been instrumental in really improving the reputation that we have in the Beltway and access, and not saying stupid things when you're trying to interface with the congressional person, which can be very easy to do. So it's been awesome. Welcome to the show. We're really gonna talk about political footballs today.
There are a lot of them. It's an election year, and I mean it's a big election year because you've got, as you said, I'm running for local city council here in Alexandria. So like the people who you call when your trash doesn't get picked up, when there's a pothole on your road, all the way up to the president of the United States is on the ballot this year. All of Congress, a third of the U.S. Senate, a good chunk of governors are up. So I mean, there's a lot of political footballs to be had, and since at least 2006, 2008, healthcare's been front and center as one of the political footballs in America. And that's at the local, the state, and the federal level. And I know for us in long-term care, we mostly think about Medicare, but, so that's why we do a lot of federal policy. But, who the governor is in a state determines things like access to pharmacogenomic testing under your Medicaid programs, PACE access, different things like that. And then even at the local level, you have things like zoning laws that may or may not restrict the ability to build a hospital in a community that might not have one. We can look at, we know that unfortunately pharmacy thefts are up. Like, what are local governments doing to ensure too that, pharmacy products are being kept safe and that we aren't sort of fueling illicit drug sales with what were illicit products that were stolen. That's a local public safety issue that impacts pharmacy.
And I think aligned with that, and I think the casual member doesn't always think about this, but they are particularly important to their congressperson.
Oh, absolutely.
They're not only a constituent, but sometimes they're a business owner. They're responsible for jobs. And because these healthcare issues are so front and center for the government, they become front and center for that particular congressperson.
Well, and it's all healthcare. I mean, all of us have a health. Even if we're in perfect health, we should still be seeing a doctor. We still need our routine vaccinations. We also, though, need, something as simple as I cut myself and I need Neosporin and a Band-Aid. Though we go to our pharmacy for even those things when we're in perfect health. Having perfect health also requires maintenance of keeping it perfect, right? So, yeah, it absolutely is. But for us, especially in long-term care and with a focus on older adults, if you look at the polling, 60% of seniors vote. So of the patients that our members are taking care of are the ones actually voting and electing these members of Congress. So they should care a lot about these patients and how they're being taken care of, because, the vast majority of voters in any election are over the age of 65.
Yeah, we do a lot of work with the National Minority Quality Forum, and I was sitting in a meeting. This is probably 18 months ago. This is a while ago, but they do a lot of mapping.
Yeah.
And they do a lot of mapping of diseases, and they're part of their business is to help candidates understand the health of their particular district. So they'll actually tell the candidate, hey, the diabetes rate in your district is 52%, which turns that into talking points for that particular candidate. When they're talking about healthcare, they're trying to reach their constituency. They are powered with this really analytical data about who is in their particular area, which I guess you kind of think that. I guess you never think people in Congress are that smart, but some of the people behind the people in Congress are smart enough to know that these things are important.
Well, but it's also too a question of, you may be from Michigan, but you live outside my district. Well, I think you matter and are important. you don't vote for me.
Right.
So it's my job to represent the people who live within this specific geographic area. And that's really the job. But also going back to what we were saying too, there are only 2 pharmacists in all of Congress. There's not a single one in the U.S. Senate. There's 2 doctors in the U.S. Senate, and then there's a handful of them in the House. There aren't many nurses either. So, as a healthcare professional, pharmacists, physicians, nurses are really important to the offices, because I can tell you there are 4 congressional staffers that are pharmacists. That's it. So 535 offices, all with staff, and there's 4 people total that are pharmacists. Even fewer physicians, even fewer RNs up there. So the people that are making these decisions don't have a healthcare expertise. So it's really important for them to hear from the people actually practicing in their district what that reality is. And I also think it's important too for pharmacists to know, like we just talked about, like if you live on the other side of this line, they might not care. You might be caring for patients that live in 2 different districts, and an office will care about that. If you're taking care of a nursing home A that's in District 1 and nursing home B that's in District 2, you should always be emailing both of those members and saying, I take care of constituents in your district. And frankly, I would encourage you to say how many. I care for 47 of your constituents at this facility. They need you to do X, Y, and Z for them.
And let's parlay that, because we do a lot of those alerts where we send out emails that we try to get our members to then in turn fill out an email and send it to their, and it's all automated. It's super easy. You can press a button and send the letter that you probably wrote directly to your congressperson, or you can adjust it and put in things like I service 47 members. But talk about the importance for that, because I think some people are like, oh, I'm just going to send in this letter and it doesn't matter.
So I worked on the Hill for 6.5 years. I worked for 2 members. One office had a policy. Everyone who wrote a letter got a response. Every single letter. You could just say, like, I don't want the house on my block to sell. That's not a federal issue. We would still send you a note saying, hey, thanks for writing in. Unfortunately, this isn't a federal issue. We encourage you to talk to your locals. But they matter. And I can also tell you on some of these issues, we just wrote an action alert on quality adjusted life years, which is a metric that most people consider to be discriminatory because it disadvantages older adults and people with disabilities because they don't have quote unquote perfect health. So we have this action alert. You're not allowed to use it in Medicare right now, but Medicaid can still use it. VA can still use it. NIH can still use it. So what we're working on is to try and get that discriminatory metric out. I talked to a few offices. Most offices haven't heard from a single constituent on this issue. Mm-hmm. So if you're the one person that asked them to vote yes, and they've not heard from anybody else, and they don't, necessarily have a dog in this fight, this is a very simple, it's not a very simple issue. It's very complicated because it employs all these other policies, but no one is running on this as a campaign ad, right? So if you're the person that writes in on something that the office really isn't paying attention to, but is really important to your patients, then that's a big deal. And I also think too, it's a different thing if Jim, lobbyist, writes the email versus pharmacist writes the email. Because, they know that you guys are actually taking care of these people. I always like to remind people, when you look for the top 5 professions trusted in the Gallup poll, pharmacists are always on that list with nurses. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So your weight as a pharmacist is going to carry a lot of water. And then also too, just so so when these all come in, it's all sort of digital. There's a system depending on which office you're in that manages them. There's 3 or 4 different systems that everybody has, but every incoming message does get tallied for and against, and the members and the staff have access to that instantaneously. So, when I would write speeches for the Congresswoman, I would often go in and see, we've heard from 500 constituents that this is a bad idea. But also it was helpful for me too. Like, let's say a pharmacist were to write in and we wanted to oppose the bill and issue a statement and the pharmacist also opposed it. I can then call that pharmacist, see if they're willing to give the Congresswoman a quote. Now, not only is the Congresswoman opposing, but a healthcare professional from the district is also opposing. Which then makes it a little bit more interesting for a reporter to write about. But it also helps build that connection too. But there are, of course, big issues where it's, the partisan issue of the day where your letters, unless it's thousands of letters, really isn't going to matter. But on some of these little things like that quality life issue, even something like the long-term care pharmacy definition, not really super top of mind for folks, a handful of messages could really swing a vote. And then when we talk about things like provider status, that's really those messages, it's about volume there, because that's a big policy. So that's why, everyone in pharmacy is all singing from the same card. We all have the same letter, so that, a member of Congress is getting, 30 letters from ASCP members, 50 letters from NCPA members, 28 members from APHA, so they're hearing from 200 or 300 pharmacists on something like that, because it is, it does have such a large price tag associated with that bill.
So I'm curious, you worked in Congress before you came to ASCP.
Yes.
And did the word pharmacy or pharmacist, was that ever on your radar? Healthcare, sure, certainly.
Yeah.
It's always a topic. And if not, do you think now, being at ASCP, and I know you're talking about all the time, but is pharmacy starting to become a subject that's coming up more often, or are we basically how we've always been?
So for Barbara's district, pharmacy was not a big priority. Healthcare was always a priority for us, but California, it's a little bit different sort of situation. But in Illinois, you have Walgreens headquartered in Chicago. So it was something that was top of mind. But really what we were dealing with in the Congresswoman's district, which is the second, was pharmacy deserts, was the closures and people not having access. And it was, in particular, as you were saying, it was, what was really tragic was it was overlapping with those areas of really high asthma rates, really high rates of diabetes, were also the places that were losing their pharmacies. So, our constituents that had the most need, that were trying to manage diabetes, often unsuccessfully, they were losing their access to a pharmacy that was potentially walking distance or even a quick little drive from their house, because of that. And, when that becomes the situation and you have something like diabetes that you need medicines to manage and manage correctly, now you're forcing these people into an even harder situation, right? So they know they need these medicines, but, we've got kids that need to get to soccer practice. We've got food that needs to get on the table. Like the pipe in the kitchen's been leaking for 6 months and needs fixed. All of these things. And then to take another 20 minutes out of the day to go to a pharmacy when there used to be one that you drove past on your way home.
Right.
So that was top of mind. And then less sort of pharmacy specific, but, the drug pricing issue has always come up. And that's been front and center since, as I said, since at least 2008. Of something, when I was there, we were really talking about there was the focus on getting that cap put in on diabetes medicines and insulin. So that was really the focus then and there. But I would also say too, most people don't think about pharmacy when they think about healthcare. And when it comes to ASCP, they're sure as heck not thinking about long-term care. Because, in an average year, 98% of the population's in the ambulatory space. It's 2% over here. So when CMS, DEA, Congress are all writing these rules, they're all thinking CVS, Walgreens, Rite Aid, the local community pharmacy. They're not thinking, about a patient you can't leave.
Do you think that's going to change now with the baby boomer population and obviously all these statistics and skyrocketing, and there's going to be a lot of rural, access of care and those type of things?
I think that is, but it will only change if we have to continue to remind them, because we saw this happen in the pandemic. When the MABs rolled out, we had a really great relationship with everyone involved with the MABs. And we, those were being distributed properly through the facilities, and the facilities with need were getting them. And then we switch over and we start doing the vaccines, and everything we learned about rolling the MABs we threw out. And then the only ones who followed it were West Virginia, who vaccinated all of their people in a month, when the rest of the country was at 28% for their nursing home populations. And then we did the same thing when Paxlovid came out. In fact, we made Paxlovid even harder when we commercialized it, because there was so much confusion around Part A. Every single chance that we had to do something in the COVID pandemic, the government officials had to relearn that long-term care was something that existed. And so of all the things, actually, we've submitted a lot of comments in the last few years. I think probably the most important one we did was every 4 years, the U.S. government redoes the national health strategy. And that's, your pandemic preparedness, but that's sort of everything from like, how do we get more managed cases of diabetes to how do we fight the next pandemic? Our comments explicitly stated that local public health officials need to have some sort of communication mechanisms with their long-term care pharmacies, because most of them don't know. There isn't a single list of them. And most of these public health people aren't trained to think about long-term care. And I think one of the, just as a random thing, but we were part of an exercise that folks were talking to us about, if there were an anthrax attack, where could you go to get Cipro restocks? And we were like, well, nursing homes do stock Cipro. Like in an immediate attack aftermath, there will be some at least available, but no one was thinking that the nursing homes or the nursing home pharmacies might have this. They're all thinking strategic stockpile. Yeah.
But that long-term care definition obviously would make that easier, right?
Well, there is one in regulation right now. So there is a definition of a long-term care pharmacy in regulation. There is an effort to move that into statute. There's sort of lots of thinking about that. I always provide caution to anything for folks that, on average, it takes 7 to 8 years for something to become law. Even if it's a simple thing that everybody agrees to, you're spending 6 to 8 years. The regulatory process is much faster. It is slow. It is difficult. It is opaque. So is working with Congress. But, there's some more flexibility over here, but sometimes you don't want that flexibility. So it's important, to consider something like that, whether it's a definition of a long-term care pharmacy or even other definitions. What is a class of a drug is something we run into all the time. And definitions matter in government because that's their sort of legal existence. Right. Yeah. That's we deal with that with the antipsychotic class. They're automatically get a box warning regardless of evidence. Right. So something, it's those definitions are important. And it seems weird to sort of play like Webster's dictionary, but like, you think, I want to go to Congress and I want to do things that matter. I want to like move money around. I want to solve problems. But sometimes those little things like defining something are what's important.
Because you don't want to misinterpret them.
Well, exactly. And I mean, we've even had things too that, you start to get into what makes a drug an independent drug and patentable. And there's different definitions of that. And there's actually different legislation that could change the existing standards. So, that's a very, all of this stuff really kind of matters in like a very weird way. And it's super, super boring. But, it really does matter. And I like with the quality adjusted life years, that's how people are making decisions on who has access to care and who's too sick, frankly, to take care of.
So you touched on two things, and I think I always want to reiterate to our members. One is your letter writing campaigns are important. They are important. Your letter gets somehow addressed. It may not get responded to, but it sits on a pile somewhere, and somebody's responsible to be like, hey, we have a giant pile of these letters, so we should probably think about what they're saying.
Yes.
And we have a smaller pile of the letters that are against that. So it matters. All that stuff matters. The other thing is to make sure that you're involved with your local, whoever it is, senator, congressperson. Yes. You have to recognize your value to them as a constituent, as someone who takes care of constituents, as someone who might own a business that employs people in the constituency. That all is critical.
Yes.
And important.
And this is the year to start it. It's an election year. Everybody needs pictures at local businesses. Everybody wants to talk to your employees who might be able to vote for them. So if you haven't, invite your member of Congress to come out to your pharmacy. Better yet, invite them to come to your pharmacy and then take them to your facility with you and show them what you do at the facility too. Yeah. That absolutely, folks are looking for those opportunities right now. It's an election year. The members will be home all of August. They will be home all of October campaigning, most of September. So, now is a great time to get that invite in and encourage them to come to your facility. And if not, don't be upset if the district director is willing to come and the member isn't. The district director probably knows more. And, if they have a good experience with that district director, that member will come in the near future.
And you don't think about that. At that time, they need you as much as you need them. So,
well, that feeds into the fly-in that we do every year. Yeah. Like, it's important to come. You're going to meet with your office, your congressional office, your Senate office. You may or may not meet with the actual senator or congressperson. Sometimes you will. I used to always get to meet with mine because I went to the same high school as Steve Shabbat. So whatever, even when it was an ASCP event, I would show up and that would be the one meeting where the member showed up because he's like, oh, you went to LaSalle, I went to LaSalle. Like that little thing meant something, at least to Steve. Mm-hmm. I learned after a while that talking to Steve was not going to be the way to get my issue across. I want to talk to Steve's LD or H, healthcare.
Yeah, you want to talk
person.
to Elizabeth in his office. Like,
So-
Steve's a great guy, but Elizabeth.
but you kind of have to be here to do that and
Yeah.
see that. And it's important.
Well, and that opens the door too. You get, we always, if you come to the fly-in, which is April 15th and 16th, so put it on your calendar. One of the things we do when we train you is to send that follow-up email to the person you met with saying thank you. And then also like following up with, here's the other things I can help you with. If you ever have any questions about X, Y, and Z, let me know. So, we will train you to do that. And then now you've got that person's email address.
Yep.
So, and that person covers health issues for that member. So if there is anything that pops up ever again, or you get an action alert from us, you can always take the action alert, but you can also personally just email that person and say like, hey, Jim, I know you cover healthcare for Congresswoman Kelly. We talked in April about this. I recently read this bill and think it's great. Think the Congresswoman should consider it. Thanks, bye. And the nice thing is when you use our voter voice system, if you want, you can just copy and paste the letter iHeart. So you can just copy and paste it in your email and send the same thing. I like to say the voter voice system is 3 clicks in less than 3 minutes. So it shouldn't take you very long to do it. And it's always at ascp.com/advocacy. You just scroll down to the middle of the page and just click any of the blue links. The other nice thing about the system is if you don't remember if you'd sent a letter already, the system won't let you send the same letter twice. So go in, click them all. And if you've done it before already, the system won't let you do it. So there's no worry about sending multiple emails.
So you talked earlier about pricing, and that's always a drug pricing, and that's always a big topic.
I mean, that's the football, right? We're talking.
That's the big football. So, we all know and kind of been sweating through IRA, the Inflation Reduction Act that came out. And to me, I don't know the right word. Maybe it's almost silly and unnecessary. Like they believe, and they're patting themselves in the back that, hey, we're now doing something about drug prices. We take these 10 very expensive drugs, and in a couple, 2-3 years from now, we're going to reduce the prices on those. However, we all have a 2 to 3 year head start, and it's almost silly because we're going to outrun them. And I've seen this on the nursing home side, certainly seen it now on the pharmacy side. So I don't think that they're really saving any money, that they're promoting that they're going to save all this kind of money. But at the end of the day is we're going to reposition ourselves, and then we'll keep ahead of them, and we'll keep doing that. So, it's almost unnecessary, I guess. What do you agree with that, first of all? And,
these companies have lots of lawyers who they pay lots of money to find these loopholes, right?
Yeah.
But I think that's part of it. And then, folks have also raised the issue of, when things go generic, the timeline, it's 7 years versus the 9-year
Right.
generic. So you really only,
most of those drugs will
you're
be
saving for
close
2
to it.
years.
Yeah.
It's a small window of the savings. I think what's so weird about the IRA, right? Like we've all talked about this and everyone has lots of predictions, but everything that's happening right now is happening for the first time and it's all happening behind closed doors.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not going to be until August that we have any transparency on how this works. So exactly like you're saying, we'll figure out ways. There will be, of course, industry people who will figure out how to outrun this rules. But on the flip side of that too is we don't really know what the rules are. We don't know
Right.
where are the guardrails on the field, where are the yard marks. We have no idea right now. And I think there was a lot of confusion and interest too when that list came out, right? Because we all were like, okay, Eliquis is going to be on it. Like we all knew there was going to be those sort of products, but it's the pens, that sort of last, that number 10 on the list. That's all the
Novolog.
all the pen products, and and that starts to get into delivery system versus a medicine and all of those sorts of things.
Which with the Insulin Reduction Act, that was kind of unnecessary medication to put on the list originally. Because
I want to dig into this just a little bit because I always feel like, and Jim brought it up during his talk about how the government works, takes 6 to 8 years to bring a piece of legislation. It's not any different for drug reform, and IRA took a long time to get here. The question becomes, by the time it gets here, how relevant is it anymore? I mean, we're all worried about 2026 and the negotiations for these products, but we just did an apex on anticoagulants. So Eliquis and Xarelto are expensive. They're going to be negotiated, but they're not going to be as cheap as warfarin, even in 2 years.
Right.
Only 50% of your eligible people in nursing homes are on Xarelto or Eliquis. The rest are on warfarin. So the solution is first of all, you need to get more people on the drug that's the right drug.
Right.
Yes, it's more expensive.
You're going to regress and go back to warfarin.
You don't want to be on warfarin. So yes, you might take a revenue hit on the cost as a pharmacy, or we might lower the price of Eliquis, but we should be using more of it.
Right.
So ultimately, to a pharmacy, it should feel like kind of an opportunity, not so much a risk.
But no, that's
and we have to look at it that way. And the reason I brought up the 6 to 8 years is we fixed insulin right when the GLP-1s came out.
Yeah.
Now, granted, if you're
Right.
a type 1 diabetic, this is wonderful for you. You're getting your insulin much cheaper than you paid for it before. If you're a type 2 diabetic on insulin, you probably want to be on Ozempic and one of the GLP-1s
Right.
because you're going to lose 30 pounds and deal with your
Right.
diabetes.
Mhm.
And now we're almost in the same cycle again.
That's my point.
Now
The
everybody's
government's
going to be
really
like,
not saving any money.
They're not.
Well, and common, American Joe,
Yeah.
not going to know that. They seem like, oh, look what we did. We put these drug prices.
but I
up
will
there.
say they
That's
will
not
know.
changing the
No,
industry.
They will know when they start when it starts to become challenging to get the Ozempic and the Mounjaro,
Yeah.
maybe because of your economic status, and then it's going to be a big problem.
Well, and you're going to push right now you potentially create a system where your people who have private insurance are the haves,
Yeah.
and Medicare, Medicaid are your have-nots.
Yeah.
Or even your VA is a have-not over here.
Yeah.
And that has to be managed. And I think, we always say right medicine, right person,
Yeah.
right? That's what this is about. This is about making sure the right person gets the right medicine so they can have the best quality of life, period, end of the story.
Right.
It should not matter what color you are, where you come from, how much money you make, who the hell provides your insurance.
Right.
You should be able to have the right medicine for the right person. And unfortunately, right medicine, right person is not good business.
Right.
Right. That's not good business. And unfortunately, too, because of the solvency issues that CMS is under, it's driving restrictions of access to care. That's the only way they can stay solvent as new things come to the market at a higher price point. And even IRA isn't really going to solve that long-term
Right.
solvency issue as you get more people into the system and you still are experiencing, 20-30% inflation on healthcare costs. I mean, the rest of the economy is experiencing this inflation, but we've consistently seen that healthcare inflation year over year over year over year. And, as I said, it's been an issue since 2006. It's 2024. We've been talking about it for 18 years now? It's a child. Like, this can vote, right? That's a person. It can vote. But no one's we got IRA, right? Now it's 2024 and we're just now talking about the PBMs.
Yeah.
With 10,000% growth rates in over 10 years in the margins. Everybody knows this is a problem, and it's this weird. Fortunately, because Congress doesn't work, we're playing whack-a-mole.
Yeah.
As each one of these pops up, we're smacking it, and then IRA, you smack it down. Okay, cool. But what's that going to do to prices in the private sector?
But it almost
market?
seems like that our Congress is not even in America, like in a different country, because everybody knows in pharmacy world, the PBMs have known for years, except they're just finding out about it a year or 2 years. How do they almost hide themselves from this
I would
basic
say,
common knowledge?
I mean, I would encourage, though, pharmacists to make the case to their members about these sorts of things. You don't always have to email because there's a bill. It is worth raising these concerns. And our friend in Congress that is a pharmacist and an ASCP member, Buddy Carter, has been talking about these PBMs for 15 years. Yeah. They knew about it, frankly.
Mm-hmm. But they didn't understand it, I don't think.
Well, I also think, too,
the impact of them.
It's, you don't get to make the rules unless you win, right? Mm-hmm. Everyone's worried about getting reelected in 2 years. Yeah. Also, one of the really dangerous things that has happened, and I think folks should be aware of this, too, is most members of Congress have served less than 3 terms. Everyone sort of thinks about those folks like the Maxine Waters who've been there for decades on top of each other. But there's been such a churn in Congress because politics in America is just so crazy. There was also a redistricting in 2020 that changed some things around. So 1/3 of Congress is new. So these people haven't been hearing this for 20 years. They were a car dealer or an insurance salesperson or a teacher, and now they're in Congress and they have to learn all of this stuff. So that gets back to why it's so important for us. But I think the other problem is because Congress is so broken for a number of reasons too, to fix the system would require fixing the system. It's not the manufacturers with IRA. It's not PBM reform here. It's not a little bit with VA here. We have to look at the whole system, but no one's willing to do that because you don't have the political will to do big things. I mean, the last time somebody tried, one could argue that the ACA was a big, bold movement. I do not think it was. It was not a big, bold movement. It was Romney Care. So, you know, that, but in 2010 that happened, and how many people lost their seats? And then we had the Republican Party for at least another decade run on this idea of repeal and replace. So anyone who does want to be bold and make the real changes that we need is remembering what happened 14 years ago on this. And also remembering too, you don't always get everything right? Social Security was passed in the 60s. The last amendment to the Social Security Act was in 1992. 30 years, we were still amending the bill. We don't get it perfect on the first time. But with taking 8 years to pass something,
we didn't put pharmacists
there's a real hesitant. Yeah. Well, the next amendment will be the provider status, which will amend it and put pharmacists in the bill.
That's in 2092.
But so you have to sort of like, there's also not a willingness to go back and look at this stuff either, which is concerning. And as we said, it takes 8 years. So you pass something, there's something in it that's not great. It could take 8 years before you get that changed. You know, there were concerns with the ACA and the Taft-Hartley Trust, which is what, you know, unions have that they use to fund their health programs and the retirement programs. Well, under ACA, there's all these different challenges that were created from them. And folks for a long time have been talking about fixing it, but no one has. Just because it's like, it's too hot to try and touch the ACA at all. So it's part of your problem.
Makes sense.
I do think one thing to sort of pull it back globally that I think will have an impact is it's going to be much easier to articulate caregiver and older adult issues because of the number of them that are here and the influence they have over each of us. Everybody's got a mom, a dad, a grandfather, grandmother, and they're invariably going to run into the healthcare system in some capacity. I mean, my neighbor, we had moved a couch from my neighbor's house to his wife's parents' house. Her mother is in a rehab facility. They had the Medicare bed that they got, which looks like a prison bed. I mean, it's sitting on their porch, and I'm like, this is the bed you get from Medicare. It's like that brown metal, like rails, and then you get like a 3-inch pad and a 5-inch pad that's covered in like thick industrial. It looks like a gym mat. And this is the bed.
Sounds comfortable.
And this guy had gone out. Now this guy's wealthy, and he bought a $8,500 hospital bed so that when his wife came back home, she'd have a place that was comfortable for her because the other bed was useless. These things are going to start happening. There shouldn't be a place where, granted, he's wealthy. You shouldn't have to buy a $9,000 bed, you know, when you're older for your health care. Like there should be, or the alternative shouldn't be a prison bed. There should be something better than that. But the point is, these things are going to happen, and these things are real to people, and they think about these things. And I guarantee this couple that has no job in healthcare is like, what is wrong with our system?
So basically, there's going to be lots of suffering from our seniors.
And they're going to say, we got to do something about this. And then it's going to resonate when people like us talk to them and say, well, here's some things we could do. And they're like, yeah, this happened to my mom. This happened to my neighbor's mom. Like, we need to fix this.
And you hear that on the Hill, but I will also say, too, you know, that becomes a system of not just economic access, but also like, who knows how the system works?
Yeah, right.
Because there are people in Alexandria here. Our local hospital system, Inova, has an amazing at-home care system. And that's not the beds they use for that. Because I've seen the beds they use for that. It's a great system. But unless you know to go and ask for that, you don't. And again, that gets into the haves and the have-nots. And then all of this is going to drive greater health disparities because your economic access and your information access, knowing who to talk to, are entirely different. But, you know, there are caregivers in Congress. Nanette Berrigan from LA, her mother has Alzheimer's disease, and she is the caregiver. Linda Sanchez and Loretta Sanchez, both from California, both of their parents had Alzheimer's disease, and they were caregivers for both of them. There are more of these people in Congress than you think. The trick really is letting them know, well, a couple of things. Letting them know that we have their back, and I think that's important, even if they're not your member of Congress. And this, you know, gets into we have the ASCP PAC where we do support people that do take these sort of leadership roles. You can support that, or you can always write your personal checks, or you can remote phone bank for, you know, the person you think is doing a great job. You know, there's that component of like making sure the right people are in Congress with that perspective. But I also think, yeah, as we move away from the Mitch McConnells, the John Boehners, the Harry Reids, whose frankly wives took care of their, and we move into a much more diverse and representative Congress, we're not having this thing where it's a bunch of old white guys in Congress who've never seen a sick person. Yeah. And it's lots of different people in Congress who are trying to balance being in Congress and taking care of mom.
100%.
Yeah. And that's new.
Well, and I think the other thing about that is, and you started to allude to it, I don't even know if you're trying to allude to it, it's apolitical. It's not DR, it's all of, like, our issues are not D issues or R issues. Now, there may be policies that float into those realms, but at the end of the day, as an association lead and an association person that leads our government affairs, it's not about D's and R's. It's about who's listening and who's going to stand up. And then ultimately, particularly in today's environment, it's about making sure you have both.
Yeah.
And you're not going to pass anything.
Well, and you also have to have both to be taken seriously, right?
Right.
Like, the Republicans are in charge of the House and Democrats run the administration. So if I send a letter from all Republicans to a Democratic administration, they're going to throw that in the trash.
Right.
And if I just do it with all Democrats, Congress isn't going to hold an oversight hearing if the administration doesn't do what they were told to do.
Right.
So, like, when we did our Project Pause letter, we worked with a doctor from Florida and a congresswoman from Florida who had run long-term care facilities before coming to Congress. So marrying that experience of running long-term care facilities on the administrative side, also a member of the Congressional Black Caucus, with a Republican doctor from Florida, allowed us to get 14 members of both parties on that letter and send a really strong message to CMS that this issue about access to care, right medicine, right patient, has nothing to do with the letter after your name and everything to do with this is what the law says. You need to do it.
Yeah. Awesome.
Well, I love the position that ASCP's in right now, because we're representing the senior population that's just booming. And at the end of the day, especially being right across the river, you know, from DC, with you being involved and being so active, and now, you know, running for your own office, and, you know, at the end of the day, I believe that Congress is going to start relying on ASCP to say, hey, tell us what we don't know. Yeah. And so I just love the position that we're in, and it's a great opportunity for us. And, you know, that's why we have members and people like that to help support this, because they're going to be coming to us for answers.
Well, and it is driving that too. I mean, I got an email this morning. I forwarded it to you. A person who's running for an open seat wants to meet with us because they know what ASCP does. Of course, they're probably going to ask for money at some point. But, you know, they did specifically reach out, and they're not even elected yet. But they know that coming into Congress, senior issues are going to be front and center. So they want to talk to us, understand what our issues are, so that if they are lucky enough to win, that they're in a position to start working on these things. Yeah. Because they know they have to get reelected in 2 years.
No, certainly. And seniors aren't going to just disappear.
Nope.
Even at the apex of their growth in the next 5 years, there's still going to be, you know, millions and millions of them around. So,
and they vote, which is probably the most important thing. You know, folks talk about the Gen Z and millennials, but we don't vote the way the seniors do.
And some of them even vote after they pass away. So that's really
right.
Well, I mean, with all of the early vote now, if that's a concern, just make sure you vote early, you know, because if something happens between now and election day,
you've already recorded
your ballot in.
Well, I will alleviate some anxiety out there. I know you're all thinking it, but city council in Alexandria is a part-time job. Jim's not going anywhere if he wins.
No, I will still be here.
Still has his regular job.
In 2028, runs for president. That's what's going to...
No.
He will occupy his free time being a council person, and that's his choice. But
yes, I feel like I will come to ASCP office, and then I have to drive past City Hall on the way home. So I feel like I'm just going to have to stop and spend on the way home every day.
So, well, thanks for being on. Thanks for sharing your insights. Having me. Everybody, you know, again, Jim mentioned it, April 15th and 16th, the fly-in. It is an opportunity to walk the halls of Congress, meet with your particular representatives, have your say on issues that they are really listening to. Plus, it's a lot of fun. I mean, I still drive. I've been here 6 years, still drive by Congress, the Capitol building, the Washington Monument, and go, wow, I actually live here. Like, where this stuff happens. Even though what happens inside, you might be like, God, those people it's awful. But it is a fun place to live, and it's a fun thing to do to go to Congress and talk to your representative.
Yeah. And I mean, I always tell people too, you can go, like, if you're uninterested in the politics side, all of the offices have products that they give out that are made in their district.
Right.
So you can go on a scavenger hunt too if you don't really want to like do this.
Right.
But no, it does matter. And I can tell you too, you know, having sat in on those meetings, a lot of times it's the only time they've ever spoken to a pharmacist, these staffers, you know, because they were like me. They're 24, 25. So their pharmacist is the person at CVS. So they don't know what you guys do. My favorite was the conversation I had with a staffer, and they said, yeah, I know a lot about long-term care. My boyfriend's grandmother's in a nursing home. And that was how she told me she knew everything about long-term care.
You got to start somewhere.
It was a great place to start. She was familiar with it. And then she had a question about it, which was like able to make us build the relationship better. So, but yeah, sometimes that is the thing. And then you will meet, like I said, you will meet staffers though they may be caring for someone at home too. Mm-hmm. So it's definitely the wash, but I will say no one is going to be unappreciative of your expertise.
Yeah. I will also say that you guys made me think of something. It is an opportunity if you work for a long-term care pharmacy to bring you. I know you make packaging with Tic Tacs and Skittles and M&Ms in them. Bring some of those with you. Drop them off at the office.
They love them. They think it's cool.
I mean, what a way to promote that. Hey, we're in your district. This is what we do.
Yeah.
So there you go.
The packaging machines is everyone's favorite when you do a tour. So if you do invite your member of Congress for a tour, just be aware they're going to be really obsessed with your packing machine.
There you go. All right. Well, thanks, everybody. We will see you on the next episode of Our Experience.